Hi everybody, this is Ina. I have a real treat for you today. You're not just going to hear me ramble on in this one. I brought a star guest for you today and I can't wait to introduce her. But first, some housekeeping. I want you to know that you can watch this and any episode by video by going to inacoveney.com/CT11. CT stands for Corporate Trailblazers. 11 is the number of this episode. You can do that with any episode of mine and you'll see my face pop up on your screen. So without further ado, I want to get started. So I want to tell you a little bit of how I found this gem. So I was on my computer and like we all do, we're looking at our Facebook feed and I saw a Facebook ad. It looked attractive. I read it. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I clicked on it and it was Rebecca Parson. I want to say Parson, but I was going to say Parsons because it's possessive. It was Rebecca Parson's Facebook ad. Rebecca Parson is the copywriter and owner of soundsgoodcopy.com, and she is a copywriter that specializes in email marketing, in making sure that when you write your emails, people are going to open them and that you can actually make sales over email. It's not just a tool to continue to engage your audience, it's a tool for sales. And that concept kind of blew my mind. I took her webinar, I met with her, and I just asked her, can you please come talk to my audience about this? And so here she is, and I'm very happy to have her. Hi, Rebecca. How are you today?
Hi, Ina. Thank you. I'm great. And thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
No, I am so thrilled that you're here. Okay, so one thing that I like to start with, because this is what my audience loves to hear, is about the journey from working for someone else to working for yourself. So when did that happen and how did that happen for you?
Yeah, so it came about because I have an MFA in poetry, and so it's a Master of Fine Arts degree, and it's like a studio art degree, but for writing. And so after that, you generally have a couple options. You can become a poetry professor, which means an adjunct making very little money, and you're living on, regardless. So I didn't really want that path. And then you could be a teacher. I didn't really want either of those. So I tried technical editing and writing for a while. And this was in 2013 or 14. I was at a technical editing job and I wasn't really enjoying it. And so I started looking up how to make money writing. And I came across this book almost by accident. It was mentioned on a site. It was called The Well-Fed Writer. And I loved it because it's old school and it was written, I think, in the 80s or 90s before you were really making money online. But it's how to make money as a freelance writer. And he gave really the principles and the basics that can be applied to online as well. Yeah. And I loved that. And it seemed very legitimate. I really didn't know that you could do this online except for maybe writing just very low 1 cent per word kind of content articles. I didn't know there was anything more really than that. Right. And that kind of opened my eyes. I started Googling and reading different blogs and stuff. And I quickly found there are basically two main categories of writing online. You've got content writing, the white papers, blog posts, stuff like that. And then you've got direct response writing, which is more about the sales, like emails and ads and sales pages, stuff like that. And it's called direct response because you write it and it should have that specific direct response from what's been written. And I was immediately drawn to that because I really liked the idea of writing something and immediately seeing the impact it has. Yeah. And so that's what I focused on the whole time. And I have learned about copywriting, direct response copywriting, and then also how are you a business owner online? How do you grow your business and market it? Those two different aspects. And that started about 4 or 5 years ago.
So how did you make the switch? Because with anybody that starts a new business, and this is something that I teach and I tell people to make sure that they know, they're not going to be making money for a while, right? So if you're going to stop work and focus on entrepreneurship, you need to have the gut for it. You need to know that you're in this for the long haul, that you're not in this because you're going to follow some get rich quick scheme. It's something that you know that if you're doing all the right things, eventually will pay off. So how was your transition? Because that is a very risky move. It's very scary for anybody to jump. So what was your story around that?
I made it riskier for myself because at the same time I was starting it, I also moved to Germany from New Mexico. So I was there for about 8 or 9 months, just traveling around and living there.
Yeah.
And
why Germany?
It helped. My mother's German, and so I'm half German, half American, and I had never gotten the chance to live there. And so I went there and just spent more time there and practicing German and stuff like that.
Nice.
And it was good. I'd say I decreased the risk by lowering my costs a lot, even though I was in Germany. I found ways to travel creatively. So there are sites, for example, where you can do house sitting for people in other countries. So you're like traveling and being a tourist, but you're not paying for where you're staying. So there are things like that where I was lowering my expenses to decrease the risk and also focusing on increasing my income at the same time.
Had you ever heard of anybody doing that before? You're like a pioneer in your life. You're like, I'm just going to do something completely different that nobody I know has ever tried before.
Pretty much. I mean, it helps with so many communities online because, I didn't really know people who started businesses, and being an entrepreneur is not something that's very common in my family.
Right.
Most of my family was government and military and corporate. So, but just seeing people doing it online and seeing, okay, this is not a pipe dream or something. There are people doing it and making it work. And this is the same with the house sitting. I read about people doing it. And I just found some really good sites as well. In the beginning, there was one that was really helpful. I think it's still around. It's called Make a Living Writing. And she has a membership community. So I just paid a very small fee per month, and I could go in there and ask questions, beginner questions like, oh, I have this client and they want XYZ and I don't know what to charge, and stuff that I'm much more used to dealing with now, but at the beginning it really helped to have guidance, and so joining those communities helped.
Yeah. So I want to say just a little something about that, something interesting that happened in the past 24 hours. So because I've been talking about, I had an episode a couple episodes ago, I'm going to tell you which one it was. It was, how to overcome your limiting beliefs around money. It was episode 8. If you're on your podcast, that's episode 8. If you are looking on video, you can go to inakovini.com/CT8. And I talk about money and about my hang-ups with money and all of that stuff that you need to get over when you're an entrepreneur. And I started talking about how you invest in yourself and how you go from thinking something is an expense to something being an investment. So in the past 24 hours, I decided to draw on a board what the path has been from my initial investment to everything else, right? There are 3 things that started from a Facebook ad, and then from there, from meeting people, everything just kind of opened up like a big tree. And you're one of the leaves of that tree, by the way. And so I just want people to know, joining these like you said, you paid for a membership community, right? That's, when you look at where you ended up based on the feedback that you got from paying that, I just want people to make that connection, that everything that you have accomplished, it wasn't by chance, right? That everything just kind of had a path. And because you decided to invest in yourself, you decided to pay this membership fee and be a part of this community, you ended up doing all these amazing things and ended up being an entrepreneur. So I think I wanted to stop there because that's a super, super important concept for people to grasp, that if you don't feel like you have the right support around you, go on these Facebook communities. I have one of my own at inakovini.com/Facebook, and you can get in there and ask your questions, because I've been talking to a lot of people who really don't have that kind of support. People around them are not entrepreneurs. They don't know what the heck you're doing. They think that you're crazy for leaving your job, that kind of thing. You can find a lot of people who went through that journey, as well. So I think it's amazing that you managed to make that leap, especially knowing that your family wasn't like that, because mine wasn't either. So did you decide to move to Germany right after quitting your job? How did that go over with your family?
I was planning for Germany for about 6 months, and about the same time I was planning Germany, I was reading about how to start my own business online. And it did happen. I quit my job in June, and then I think I went to Germany in August. So
that is insane. Was your mother telling you what is wrong with you?
A little bit, yeah. She was worried, and so I was like, I thought you would be happy. I'm going to, learn better German and stuff. But yeah, she was just worried for me because it seemed so risky, but it turned out okay.
Yeah, I'm sure she's very happy now. Do you guys live close?
No, I'm on the West Coast and she's on the East Coast, but I do visit, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sure she's very, very proud of your successes. I am very sure everything worked out for the best. So let's go back to writing a little bit. So I am not a copywriter. It's something I will scream from the rooftops, because I believe that copywriting is an art in itself, right? It's a completely different skill set than knowing marketing or than knowing how to set up a website. To me, writing is just something else. You were mentioning before about there being different ways of making money writing. You mentioned content writing, you mentioned direct response. What else? Like tech writing. So if there's somebody that's listening that is paying attention to, like, wait, there are different ways to make money writing, what would you tell them? What else can they do?
We think so. Content writing, direct response, technical writing, definitely. As well, I think a lot of people need help with writing course material. So maybe people who are experts at speaking on stage or something, but they need somebody to help them translate that into course material. And so I think often people, this isn't something I have experience with, but I've seen it, they hire somebody to help them create that course material. And another one similar is ghostwriting, so writing books for people.
Right.
And especially in something interesting I've noticed is people tend to be very good at communicating in either writing or speaking, not often both. And so you have people who are really dynamic, great public speakers, but they need ghostwriters, not always, but often, to help them with that. Or, people like me, that we join Toastmasters so we can get better at public speaking. So it's just ghostwriting is something I think many people don't consider, but from what I've heard, it can be pretty lucrative.
Yeah, actually, in the next episode, it's going to be episode 12, I'm going to have a writer on the show who does ghostwriting, and he helps entrepreneurs get their books published. So if you guys are interested in that, you should tune into the next episode. But that is super cool. Let me ask you something that has always been like a contradiction in my head about writers. I would love for you to just dispel this for me. So when I write, I'm going to tell you what I enjoy writing. I love writing my emails to my audience. I just love them. I sit down and I just kind of look within. I'm like, okay, what can I teach today that is attached to a story that I can say with humor, that that will impact them? And I just love sitting down and writing, especially the current trend of writing one-liners, like one-line paragraphs. I've really gotten used to that, and I just go to town with it. I just love it. But I'm writing stuff that is coming out of my own head. So I imagine, I picture a writer as an artist, as somebody who basically does that, who likes to draw from inside, who likes to put their thoughts and their feelings and everything on the page. So it's always been a big contradiction to me to put an artist to write somebody else's content or somebody else's book or technical writing, or because it's not really coming from their artistic self. I would love for a writer to tell me how I'm getting this mixed up. Like I would love to understand those two worlds.
So it's kind of like, because you love doing your own writing, and it comes from you, and you think of an artist as writing from their own inspiration and their internal self, their world. How can they write for somebody else? Is that the question?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to being able to imagine the other person and being that person and having the empathy. And so this is something that obviously really great novelists do very well. And they totally inhabit a character who they totally made up. It's not even a real person, but they totally inhabit, and it's very different from themselves. Or even writing nonfiction. I just read a book about a CIA informant. Yeah, it was an informant, or it wasn't CIA, but anyway, I won't get too much into it. But even though that was nonfiction and the writer of the book didn't make up that character, he had to fully inhabit this person who wasn't him. So that's how I think of it, is direct response copywriting is a science, but it also uses that creative skill, which just comes down to being able to imagine being somebody else. And then for me, when I'm writing, it's very important to get the person's voice right. And that's something that I think is really overlooked in a lot of talk about copywriting, is all the tactics and formulas and little ninja hacks and all that stuff. And I don't like the word ninja, so I just use that to make fun of it. And but it's, it has to all be in the person's voice. So, what words would they use, and how do they tell stories, and what's their sense of humor and all that. And it just comes out like listening very, very carefully and then imagining.
That I am so glad that I asked that question then. You just gave me a completely new perspective on that. I didn't even think about that. I was thinking of, like you said, like the method, right? Well, like this is how you write that, but I didn't think of them embodying who they're writing it for. That's genius. I love it. So, I want to talk to you a little bit about making sales using email. I'm going to tell you what the general convention is so you can come and just like crush it with a hammer. All right? So, here's the general convention for everybody who doesn't know. Like the general marketing machine. The way that it works is you use your emails as a nurture sequence, all right? So you get somebody in through having a freebie out there. Somebody signs up for the freebie, they get their free content, and now they're in your mailing list. Once they're in your mailing list, then you have a funnel going, right? You send out the first email, which is what it says, what signing up for this says about them, right? Then you send out the next one, which kind of talks to them about, okay, what problem is it that you want to solve? And then the third one, and the fourth one, the fifth one. Those nurture sequences can be as long as you want them to be, as short as you want them to be, but they have to be several days long so that people, don't forget that you're around, right? Don't forget that they signed up for your stuff. And then after that, every week you keep sending them materials, keep sending them free things, keep sending them freebies, and I've been guilty of this. This is what I've been doing with my mailing list. And then I took your webinar and everything just blew up in my brain, because what you are saying is that you have to sell every day. Every email that you send out should have a sales action call. And I'm like, what? So, Rebecca, I want you to come here and explain yourself. Tell me what this is. I want to understand where this comes from and how it works.
Yeah, and you're totally right. That is the conventional method that's given, is to be, and the words that are used a lot are to nurture. It's a nurture sequence, and then provide value. And value in that scheme always means free. Mm-hmm. And that, I'm not saying that cannot ever work, because there are obviously people making money doing this. And I think if you plug away at it long enough, you can, nothing's guaranteed, make money with it eventually. Right. But my problem with it is just not the fastest, most direct way. Mm-hmm. And it's much more complicated than it needs to be. Mm-hmm. And I think it came partly from the world of blogging. So a lot of early online businesses were blog based, and blogs have, the way they show up in Google, of course, is posting free content. And so that became part of the whole business, and it's just kind of assumed that's how you do online business. Mm-hmm. Because that's the way it was when online business, early days of online business. But I think it's become very overused. And it's just kind of the myth is that if you give people enough free stuff and teach them enough, then they're just kind of magically going to buy from you eventually. Mm-hmm. And, you'll earn trust, like the trust that you hear a lot. If you give away free stuff, it's almost like the person you're approaching, they're like a wild bear or something. And you have to just slowly be so careful. Don't tick them off. Don't make any sudden movements. Don't let them know you have anything for sale, because they're just going to lose their mind and screw it and just unsubscribe, That's that's how I think of it.
Sorry. That was great. Okay, sorry, continue.
Yeah, and it's I don't think people are that sensitive. I don't think people are outraged when you try to sell them. I think it's actually worse when you try to hide that you have something for sale and then eventually get around to it. And I was talking to a friend of mine. She's a dance teacher. She doesn't know anything at all about online marketing, mm-hmm. but she signs up for a lot of email lists. And I was telling her about this, and she's like, yeah, I always know when I sign up for those lists that they're going to get around to selling me something eventually. I'm just like, come on, I know it's coming, just give it to me. And she feels kind of cynical about it, and she doesn't know what the terminology for things, because she's not in the world at all, but she's onto it. She knows what it is. So it's not like no one knows what you're doing. So, and another issue with it is, so you have something for sale, and that's the thing that can really help people. That's where the value is. So, right. But instead of just giving them what can help them the most right away, you kind of trickle out this free stuff up to it. And none of that stuff is really going to change their life, like 5 quick hacks to do X or 5 reasons you need to do Y, that kind of thing. But usually people aren't going to take that and make the big transformation or get the big result. They need your actual paid product for that. And meanwhile, you're trying not to give away everything and cannibalize your entire offer. So you're like, ooh, I better not give away too much. So it's just not really, it doesn't actually help people. It makes the process longer. In the meantime, if you're a coach or an expert, you have something, they have a real problem that you solve, and you're just delaying the time until they can get the solution to the problem that they have.
Right.
And the same's true with products as well. I can't imagine, like, you sign up for Amazon, can you imagine? And then Amazon made you go through 2 weeks and they're just like, here's why we named our company Amazon, here are 5 quick hacks to get the most out of Amazon. Like, no, they just start selling you.
Right.
I just, and something else very interesting about it is you hear about from Cialdini's book, why can I not remember it now? It's called Influence, and it's ways to influence people using principles of psychology, and one of them is using the law of reciprocity. And it's the idea that if you give somebody something for free, they feel obligated, like they owe you something, and they'll give you something. And so you use the law of reciprocity. If I give them something for free, they're going to feel a little bit more obligated to buy something from me. But I think it's really twisted. It's kind of like giving somebody a present only because you expect a present back.
Right.
And it just feels very manipulative and cynical. And I think it's much more upfront to just say, I have something that's really great. It's awesome. It's going to solve the problem you have. It's exactly what you want. And here it is for sale. Go ahead and buy it instead of going through the whole rigmarole.
I'm going to tell you what blew my mind about it. And that is that I believe it was in your webinar, or I don't know if I read it in an email, when you said that there are some people that might not even know what your offer is. That people are getting your emails every week and they have no idea what you do or what you sell or how much it is or what. And I'm like, oh my God, it's totally possible that that's happening with me, because what I've been doing, for the past 6 months is basically, if I'm not launching, I'm not selling, right? Because, the cart opens and the cart closes with a launch, and then you move on to something else, to a different, marketing campaign, or you start, focusing on the people who signed up for the course, there's all of these things that you're doing. But nobody is talking about, okay, this is how you continue to let people know what your offer is and how much it costs and what transformation they're going to get out of it. So if I'm not launching, I'm not selling, which means that as soon as my cart closes, I'm like, all right, so I guess that was it for the next month or 2, or whenever I'm going to have my next webinar or my next challenge to sell again. So during that time, it's a period of 2 months. And that's just my business. I'm sure other people have it better figured out. But for 2 months, people are getting emails from me having no idea what I sell.
Yeah.
And that is just unacceptable. That's unacceptable for a business.
Yeah, and I think it's totally true. And it can be useful to think about it in terms of an offline business, because the way online business is talked about, it's like this magical land where the rules of business don't apply, and it's totally different. And, it's Brave New World where it's totally different. But if you think about it, think about an offline business. If you walk into a shoe store, they only have shoes for sale every 2 months. Or do you walk in and
right.
They're like, I would love to buy, you might go in and you're not totally ready to buy a pair of shoes, but just, I'm just looking, I'm browsing, whatever. And they're like, okay, cool. Well, we're going to send you 2 months of content about the history of shoes in America and how our business started and 5 things to watch out for when you're buying shoes. And the reason you need this type of shoe, not that type of shoe. And then, we're also going to send you some free shoes, but they might not even be the shoes you want. We're just going to give them to you because they're free. And, then in 2 months you can buy from us. And that's what
right.
it's like as well. Like with
right.
emails, how do you know that people want your checklist to do X or your 5 top reasons to do Y? You don't know exactly. It's kind of like just shooting into the dark. Are they really going to want it? And
right.
like you said as well, when you're not selling for those whole 2 months, you're kind of, in a way, people are so worried to sell up front because they don't want to piss people off. Mm-hmm. But if you actually train people that you never sell, and then you start, in a way, you've trained them not to buy from you and
right.
train them to expect you to never sell. And in a way,
right.
that actually ticks them off more because
right.
you've trained them to expect one thing and now you're doing another.
And I'm going to say what you just said again, because that's another one that hit me, right? Because I've actually felt this way. Now, I am in the business. I know how nurture sequences work, and I know that everybody has a product to sell. So when there comes a long period of time where I'm just getting free content, guess what? I consume it. I enjoy it. I follow people on their Facebook. I follow people on their podcast, and I'm listening and I'm getting everything. And guess what? There's a period of 10 days where all they talk is about their product because they're in the middle of a launch. And I'm like, okay, wrap it up. I want to get back to the free stuff,
Yeah.
you know? Because I know that their product is not necessarily for me, or I'm not ready to buy it yet, or like, I'm like, okay. I felt tempted because 10 days is a long time when you're consuming content every single day, right? 10 days is a long time to quote unquote put up with, somebody talking about something you don't care about. So you just end up like trying to skip it. So I love this because when you incorporate the sale inside your content, when you say like, okay, here is what I want to talk to you about today, and this is how we can work together better, how I can help you with that transformation. If that's something that's happening ongoingly, right, then that's something people will get used to, people will still enjoy the content, and people will continue to know and to understand what is it that you are doing, so they can pay for it later on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well in launches, it's tricky with launches because there's so many moving parts. So if one of them goes wrong, like just there's the wrong link in one of the parts, then you lose a day of sales or something like that. And often in these really big $1 million launches, you have lots of people working on the different parts and you have to make sure it all comes together. It's a lot of pressure. And even companies I work with that are making a lot of money with launches, like it really puts their whole team under a lot of stress, a lot of time. Yeah. If one thing goes wrong, they lose sales. But when you're consistently selling an email every time you sell, you can test and see what works and maybe try a new subject line that occurred to you. Maybe this will work. And if it doesn't work, it's no big deal because you're going to email later that week again. And if it does work, you learn something new. But when there's so much pressure on the launch, you don't have room for that learning and to try things. Mm-hmm. And as well in the launch, it's like, okay, I'm going to try and get people into this product. So, but if it's like you and you're not interested in that product, mm-hmm. So they send out the FAQ email. Here are all your commonly asked questions. You're like, I don't have any questions because I'm not interested in the product or whatever. Or here's how much it costs, or here's the payment plans and stuff like that. And all of that is important. I'm not saying not to do those things when you do launches, just that when you write emails in a way that's more entertaining and story-based, you can have a part of the email that people enjoy reading, even if they're not quite ready to make the sale. If they are ready, it pulls them in, they make the sale. If they're not ready at that time, at least they're actually still reading your emails because they're entertaining and relevant through that. Right.
And something that I also do, that I find myself doing, is I become aware of someone, and I'm probably not going to buy their product yet, but I might. I am the kind of person who takes time with that kind of decision, with that kind of investment, because I like to see what else is out there, what my options are. I like to really try on the idea and feel good about it, and then go and buy it when I want, right? Not, during the launch period, and then after that I'm out of luck. So the ongoing process just kind of works better for my personality. I may not buy, I'm not the impulse buyer. I'm not going to buy it on the first email. But, if I continue to read, if I continue to consume, it kind of starts sipping into my brain. And then it will pop out once it's ready. So I think that's a much better way anyway. But you were saying about entertainment rather than information. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that's something that I focus on as well, because I think there's this myth that the most valuable thing you can provide in emails is information. Mm-hmm. And so again, those checklists or things to stay away from, or don't do this or do that, it's all information based. Yeah. But again, I think my guess is that it again comes from the early days of online business, and when Google wasn't around, or it was AOL and Ask Jeeves and all that stuff, and it took longer to find information. Now you go on Google, you find information in a millisecond, and it's actually what you want. It's almost like email, you're just creating a crappy search engine, because it's like, well, maybe I'll just give them the 5 reasons that you shouldn't be nurturing an email, or 5 reasons to do this as a life coach or whatever. But that's not what they want right then. It's like, what's the 1 in a trillion billion chance that random checklist is like what they actually want right then? When they actually want information, they'll just Google it. Right. And it's really, and we also have an information overload. I just heard a statistic today that people check their phone on average 150 times a day. And
that seems low to me.
That seems low to me too.
If you ask me, that seems very low.
Yeah. And so people are getting information all day, every day. And at the same time, like binge watching of TV shows has gone way up, not just because it's available all the time online, but because people still love entertainment. That's why I think like entertainment is so much more valuable now, because one, it's so much easier to find information now than it was 15, 20 years ago. You can just find whatever you want, whenever you want. And so what are the chances that whatever random piece of information you're sending out in an email is exactly what they want at that moment? It's not that likely. And even if you're within a certain topic, you know, they signed up for your business coaching thing, so it's all about business coaching. Well, there's still a lot in there. Yeah. So that's one thing. And the second is just information overload. But at the same time, people are still totally captivated by entertaining content. And that's why, you know, Netflix binge watching and news sites and being on Facebook so much is it's the entertainment. And so that's what I focus on with emails, is telling entertaining stories or just entertaining content and stories that grabs people's attention, so that it's not about information. Like, people always want to be entertained. And so if you know your audience, you can tell stories they're going to love, and then you bring it around to your offer that you're making.
I love all of that stuff. Tell me, before I let you go, because I'm going to run out of time and I could be here another hour just picking your brain on this. Talk to me about subject lines. So the way that I come up with my subject lines is a couple different ways. It depends on my mood, right? Some days I actually go and look up, other people's content that I find myself, gravitating towards, and I read their subject lines or their podcast names or all that stuff, and I just kind of see which one grabs me. One exercise that I tell people to do is go to their email, right? Like their entire email list, and I just tell them, just read the subject lines. And when you find yourself unable to stop yourself from clicking, like, stop yourself and figure out what made that headline irresistible to you, right? So you can start to figure out, like, what is an irresistible headline. So when I feel like, studious, I'll do it that way. And other times I just kind of picture myself getting an email, right? And I just try a few. I probably try about 10 subject lines, and I write them out, and then I kind of test them to see how they feel to me until I settle on one that I'm like, okay, I feel like I could read this, and boom, that's when I send. So I want to hear about subject lines, because it doesn't seem like my subject lines are really affecting my open rate that much. So so I must be doing something wrong. But what is your take on subject lines?
So I think that it's a good idea to come up with 10 different subject lines. It's a good exercise, and it's something that I've seen. There's another copywriter called Neville Medora that he recommends doing. And so he mentioned this in a blog post or an email. Maybe he'll come up with 3 subject lines for an email. One would be straight benefit, just here's what it's about, or just very factual. One might be a bit more curiosity or strange. And I can't remember what the third one was, but you can try like 3 different types like that. I like ones that either ping someone's curiosity, and so you put 2 things together that don't seem to belong together, and then people read it and they wonder, how does that work? Or where they're hinting at a story. Like, I had one subject line that was just boss from hell. So if you see that, you want to read the story, because you're going to think, and that one did well. But I had another one that did really well. I studied up on what people are doing with subject lines and email content, and learn what people are doing. And there are certain ones that work very well in internet marketing. And they might be a bit more aggressive, a bit more obviously salesy, but they wouldn't work on other lists. And something interesting on that topic as well is that just because a subject line works really well on one list doesn't mean it does on another. And so that's kind of the danger that you see when people say, 10x your whatever with these subject lines, or battle tested subject lines that I tested on millions of people, that kind of thing. I've had one subject line, just make sure I get the statistics right. On one list, it got a 27.9% open, and another one, it got a 9% open. Exact same subject line, and not totally different audiences, pretty similar audiences. So why? Well, that's kind of where the part of direct response copywriting and email writing, it's not 100% a science. Maybe scientists would disagree with me. I'm not a scientist, but to me it seems like science is pretty predictable. Now, probably some scientist is listening to me and saying I'm totally wrong, but whatever. To me, from the outside, it seems predictable, and like, what the laws are, and you put this in and it comes out this way, and that's how people treat copywriting. But it is still people that you're dealing with, and people are unpredictable and different, and they have emotions and passions and drives, and it's not like dealing with a machine. And that's why I think it's so important to make a regular commitment to email when you're emailing your list. And because then you can test things and you can find out what works with your list, because different groups of people are totally different. And that's why you have an almost 20% difference with the exact same subject line. So if I went and was like, everybody buy my $27 ebook where I give you all these subject lines that work for me, and I tested them on all these people. Well, so what? It might not work for you. Like, you need to learn the principles that work and then try it regularly with your audience.
Yeah. So how would I go about testing my subject lines? Because, me not being a scientist or an artist, I just kind of come like from the gut, right? And every time it's different. I feel like I'm getting farther and farther away from the scientific method in, testing my subject line. So what I do is I started a spreadsheet. So when my list started to be around 40 people, I didn't do anything below 40. Starting at 40 people, I started putting every single email that I send on a spreadsheet. So I have on one column the opens, and one column, how many people received it and how many people clicked on the link in it. And so I go and I highlight the ones that give me 30% open rate or higher. And I keep the subject line there. I keep the time of day that I sent the email, because that also matters, how many people are actually going to see it. And so if it's above 30%, I just kind of pay special attention to especially the timing of when I sent it, and let's see what I said that resonated with them. And I've tried to replicate the same success. I had one email that was opened 50%.
Wow.
One email. And I was like, okay, so what did I do? So I've tried sending an email at exactly the same time of day and exactly the same weekday. I've tried like replicating the same type of sentence, and I've actually, the email that I sent right after it, I'm like, oh, I got the formula. I know exactly what my people like. And that one got like 15% open. I'm like,
yeah.
What happened? I thought this is what you liked. I thought this is what you wanted. So I think like I'm just getting farther and farther away from figuring out what they want.
It's interesting. And what I would suggest is trying radically different things with each one. I think it can be tempting with testing and trying to figure out what works to get focus on the nitty gritty. And so, well, is it better at this time of day or that day, or is it this day of week or that day of the week? And those things are important, but I think when you're testing, you want to start with like the really big overarching things, and then you can test and get more and more fine-grained. Yeah. But so with the big things you would try, one might be, maybe it's a story-based email, and you just include something that points to the story, like the time my mom hung up the phone on me, or whatever, like where they want to read it. And you kind of think about it like a sitcom, or like the titles of sitcoms, they're kind of pointing to a story. And another one might be just one word. Sometimes I found actually some of the best ones, subject line would just be, hey. That's the whole subject line, just hey. Yeah. And other ones might be more about the benefit, or I do numbers-based ones. Like I've been talking about how like the 5 reasons and 5-point checklist and stuff doesn't work, but numbers are very compelling to people, and you can still do that without giving away free information. So 3 reasons your nurture sequences aren't working. And then I give them the reasons, but I'm not giving them a lot of free information on like how to fix it or anything, but just pointing out this is what's wrong. So that's what I would suggest, is just trying things that are totally different from each other before focusing on the finer details.
I may try that next. I'm going to tell you about an email that I just got like this week. And the subject line, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something that I'm like, what? So I opened it, and the first line was like, oh, that's not true. I just wanted to get your attention. Now onto what I wanted to tell you. And I'm like, close.
Yeah.
Who told you that was going to work?
That's a bad idea. That's a really bad idea.
That was terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know who gave them that advice, but it was not right. But they got my open. I appear as an open in their percentages.
Yeah, but I mean, that points to something interesting as well, is that the most important number with your email is how much you're making from it. So if you send an email and it makes you a ton of sales, but it gets an abysmal open rate, but you have another email that has an amazing open rate, but it didn't make you nearly as many sales, well, the more successful one is the one that made you sales. And so I think that sometimes people also get focused. I wouldn't say it's exactly a vanity metric. It's important. The more people who read your email, the greater chance. And, chances are more people will buy, the more people read. But it is important to remember like that ultimate goal, which is making sales. And also, like just meeting people's expectations, Right. I think we make fun in general, a lot of like clickbait headlines that we see on Facebook ads and stuff, but there's nothing, I don't think, inherently wrong with like clickbaity headlines. The only problem is if you click and then your expectation isn't met, or it was a trick. But the reason those headlines are used is because they work. And it's really funny looking at ads from magazines from 100 years ago. They're clickbaity before the internet. But we would call them clickbaity now. But that's the reason, is like that those persuasive methods they're using works. It's just, you can't say, haha, just kidding, I just wanted to get your attention. You know, that's really manipulative, and it won't make people happy.
That was terrible. That was terrible. I'm like, I can't delete you fast enough. How do I take my open back? I don't want to give you that stat. You know, I can't believe you got me.
Yeah, I don't like those tricks. And I had one as well, a guy who I added on LinkedIn, and then he put me on his email list, and I just started getting his emails. I'm like, dude, I never ever agreed to this.
Yeah.
Ever. Because I added you on LinkedIn, you know, and like the tricks only kept going from there. I noticed other things he was doing. It's like, this is not cool.
No. You guys, be straightforward, be honest, like tell your people how things are. It's not about the quick buck. Keep relationships trustworthy and solid. That's super important. So Rebecca, this has been absolutely lovely, absolutely enlightening. I can't wait to put this out for people to hear this. And so how can people get in touch with you? How can people find out more about what you have going on?
Yeah, so what I would recommend is that people watch my webinar, because I go into a few of these points plus a couple others as well. And then also a case study, because I practice what I preach. I was practicing it before I started preaching it. So I use these methods, and I include a case study of how I wrote an email for a client that made them $49,000 with one email. It's using these methods. And so you can see how that works. And to find that, you can go to bit.ly/sell with email. And you'll go there to my registration page. It's free. You can watch that, find out a bit more information, and that'll get you on my list as well, so you can hear more from me.
All right, Rebecca, thank you so much for being here. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I will put all of this information in the show notes and in the description of this show. So thank you so much for coming. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Ina. I had a great time.
Awesome. So for everybody else, stay tuned. Next week, we're going to talk to Steve Dimick about publishing your book as an entrepreneur and ghostwriting and everything else that we were talking about today. So stay tuned. Goodbye, world. I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Corporate Trailblazers podcast with Ina Coveney. And this is the part where I ask you to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already, and to go to iTunes and leave me a review and a star rating. It really does help people find the show when you do that, and I would really appreciate it. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Ina Coveney and on Facebook at facebook.com/female trailblazer. All right, guys, I hope to see you there. Bye.